Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2025 Kawasaki ZX-10R, and in my mind, this is a perfect combination of ultimate performance with ultimate reliability. And when you say ultimate performance in the Kawasaki lineup, things get very kind of skewed because you've got sort of the traditional super sport lineup, the ZX-4R, ZX-6R, ZX-4RR, ZX-6R, ZX-10R. There's also a 14R. To me, that's a little bit more sport touring. It's also a little bit more dated as far as technology-wise goes. So that sort of sets itself apart in the lineup. And then you've got sort of the H2 and those kind of level type bikes with the superchargers, which are really more a different kind of bike altogether as well. Very, very fast, but not true track weapons like this. But when we say track weapon, we imply that it's somehow dangerous. And although this bike is dangerous to some, it's also far more rideable than many other bikes in this class. And that's what makes this thing really, really interesting, because a lot of the time to make a bike safer for the average rider, and again, this shouldn't be just a regular average rider, this should be an experienced rider taking this, but to make it safer for even an experienced rider, sometimes they end up dulling things down. And with this bike, they've dialed up the performance and dialed up some of the electronic safety things and other pieces that make this bike a really interesting bike, because it is absolutely the leader on the track, but it's also a great street bike in the right hand. So all that to say, I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country, and they give me complete access to their entire product line. So I get to review everything that they bring in, everything that's here, which is why I get to see this. Now, this one is sold, so I have to be obviously careful with it. I'm careful with all the bikes that I work with. But again, if you want to know more about bikes like these, anytime I get a chance to review them, I will, and we'll make sure that we cover everything we can 2025 this year. So if you want to support us, support the channel, just give the video a like, leave a nice comment for Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, leave a nice comment for me, and if you just want to help me out to grow the channel, just watch this video to the end. The more videos you watch to the end, the more that helps me, the more I grow, the more I can get you information that's pretty fun, and we're going to do some more things as well. All right, let's get going with this review. So reviewing a bike like this in the style that I do it is actually pretty hard, because there's so many things to cover in this, and some of them I'm going to have to gloss over. So little things like winglets on this bike. Any super bike in 2025 has to have aerodynamic winglets, and this one has them built into little sections here where it comes through there, and the air comes through. Where is it? Somewhere in here. Yep, up, oh boy, where is it now? Down here, through here. So there's little winglets on this bike in in a couple different places to keep it aerodynamic. Obviously, it's got the styling, but there's also a lot of electronic things that I'm going to have to cover, but not always cover in detail. So if you have questions about those things, by all means, feel free to ask. I can make separate videos to talk about some of those technologies in the future. But this is a ZX-10 Superbike, 998cc, 4-cylinder. You don't see many of those anymore, and the ones you do see, some of them are dated and some of them are far more expensive, but I don't think you're getting anything more. So this is in many ways overkill for almost everyone who rides it, but that's part of what makes it pretty cool. So let's start at the front wheel, work our way back like we always do. So I always say when you take a look at the front wheel of a motorcycle, everything in this package gives you an idea of the manufacturer's intent for this bike. And the first thing you notice is these little 3-spoke wheels. You may not notice that because it's covered up by a whole bunch of other things, but 3-spoke wheels is pretty rare for Kawasaki. So usually have 5-spoke or others. So again, lightweight wheels in here, that's a big piece of it. The largest brakes out of any bike I think I reviewed this year, well, definitely any bike I reviewed this year, but probably out of every bike I've reviewed. So 320 or 330 millimeters big, but you definitely notice the size of these brakes. And of course, they are Brembo brakes. So what you have with Brembo brakes in general is not just something to brag about, which let's say for some people it is, but it's also something that can come on from high speeds, handle the heat that's created, release, and do it again and again and again without fade. So that's a big thing with the Brembo brakes. Obviously the dual discs, obviously ABS. There's a lot more to the ABS. It's an advanced ABS system on this bike. Upside down suspension, which is what you expect, but you've got something here you don't see on any other bike, and this is where I say overkill, right? These are the piggyback type shocks, so you have all the adjustments right here. This is not something any of us are going to need. Most of us watching this video are ever going to need or even be able to notice in the overall performance. But this is something that dissipates heat, so it takes the heat away from here. It's going to give you very precise control. And when you think about a racing bike that has to lean over, it's easy to absorb bumps up and down. But as you lean over, you need a very precise suspension around a racetrack to make sure that you've got full control to go a little bit faster faster around the corner than the next person, and that's what these are going to allow you to do. So you've got that in addition to a number of electronic controls, which we'll talk about in a second. Then you've got the Bridgestone Battle Axe Racing Street RS11 tires. So these are very much racing street. These are more than you will ever need for the street. They do work best when you get a little bit of warmth in them. They are very fine for the track for almost everyone, but they are also something that is street legal, street ready to go. So very high performance front end here. That's what you'd expect from a bike in this class. Taking a look at the heart of this bike, you do have it, of course, covered by fairings. The one thing about these 1000cc bikes is they've kind of narrowed out a little bit. So you've got this still a big 4-cylinder engine underneath here, 998cc, like I said, makes around 200 horsepower in stock form. And of course, people have gotten more out of it, but 200 horsepower stock form, but you've got tight fitting fairings here. I'm gonna gloss over the engine, which is sort of a big sin in the super sport world because there's a lot of other things to talk about here. The big thing you're gonna notice is that engine is compact in here, suspension is forward. Obviously this weight distribution is where you want it. Again, this is a bigger bike than the 600 series, but it's still very compact. They've really worked in the 1000cc class to make sure that those 1000cc class bikes handle like the 600 bikes used to, and that's really what this is all about. So you got the big frame rail covering the engine here, and you've got all of that tucked into a narrow chassis, narrow bodywork, all to make this bike smaller and more compact and to give it that better handling than they've ever had before. So all of that ties into a number of electronics, which we're going to get to in a second. But first of all, let's talk about riding position of this bike. So taking a look at the riding position here, again, this is not the Ninja 1100 SX, which is a bigger engine bike, closer to 1100cc, and it is more of a sport touring bike. This, of course, is a track-oriented bike. So when you have that, you're gonna have a track-oriented riding position, and that's what you have here. As you can see here, you've got very high foot pegs that are gonna keep your feet off the ground, so if you head to the track, you can go over and scrape those foot pegs. You can get right down over on the ground. The other thing you're gonna find is that very good tuck position. You've got your windshield here that kind of has, or the fairings here that kind of send the air over your shoulders, and then you have that big bump here, which we'll show you a little bit later when we show you the dash, which gets the wind over your helmet. So if I come down into my full tuck position, you can see I can rest my chest right on the tank here, see through that windshield, still see my mirrors, which are out in front of me, and be in that very much tuck position. Now, this position on a super sport bike can be kind of tiresome. So interestingly, even though this is a very track-focused bike, it does come with cruise control, and that's going to allow you to take brakes with both your hands here to just take your pressure off the throttle here, just to like release your fingers and relax a little bit. So again, these aren't made to have comfort as a first priority. They're made to have you in an aerodynamic position, but also to have you very much one with the bike. Both your elbows, your knees, your heels, your body is all tucked in tight with the bike, so you feel everything on this bike. Now, that's what you want to be on a bike that is this powerful and this capable of going through turns, jamming on the brakes, hitting the acceleration. You very much want to be one with the bike. You don't want the bike to be doing one thing and you to be doing another thing unless that's what you plan to do. You want to be one with the bike. So this seating position is all about that, but like I said, you get cruise control here, so if you're taking this to the track, driving this around town, you can pop on that cruise control, you can take that little break, you can just relax your hand, which is nice to have. If you want to go on longer tours, I don't know that that's what I would use the cruise control for on this bike, but people obviously do ride these for long times at a time, but that is available to you. But again, just like a road racing bicycle, you're leaned forward here. You've got a lot of room here as well. You can really stretch out if you're a taller rider. You can go back and get into the wind, or out of the wind, whichever way you want. So it is, again, a fairly spacious bike. Again, I'm 6 feet tall, around 6 feet tall, just putting my heels to the ground here, so a little bit taller seating position to get your rear end up, get those aerodynamics in order, as well as get your body position and that weight on the front wheel. You want to put your weight on that front wheel to make sure that you've got traction heading into corners, braking, coming out of corners, keeping that front wheel on the ground. All of that matters, but like I said, you have electronic capabilities as well to help you with all that. So let's talk about some of those electronic capabilities, some of them anyways, right now, and then we're going to take a look at the dash and move through. So I've got my cheat sheet in front of me to talk about some of the technologies in here, and some of them are very basic. Economical riding indicator, which is just a little light that turns on when you're riding economically. That's on a lot of Kawasaki bikes. They consider it a technology of theirs, and I guess it's helpful on a bike like this just to let you know you're riding economically, but those kind of things are not what we're going to talk about. We're going to skip through some of these and talk about some of the more important things. We talked about the electronic cruise control. Kawasaki engine brake control is another interesting one. It allows you to dial back the engine braking, so when you're on the track and you release the throttle, you don't have that weight transfer of the engine braking. So that is a piece on this bike. You've got Kawasaki cornering management function, which again uses the IMU. We're going to talk about that IMU in a second. It uses a computer to monitor everything that's going on, and it can sense all kinds of things. So it can sense the engine braking, it can sense the pressure in the brake lines, I believe. It can sense, like I said, that weight transfer. So it's not just the braking that it's sensing the gear changes and everything that would send the balance of the bike a little bit different. So it allows you to pick a really good cornering line and maintain that cornering line. It works with you. So it's an electronic system that works with monitoring the bike faster than you could possibly do it in your brain and understand what's going on, and allows you to pick a better line. So if you have someone with an identical bike without that, and you have something identical bike with that system, and you're good but not great riders, this one is going to allow you to hold better lines through corners than other people without that electronic control. It's got the quick shifter, it's got power modes, low power and high power mode. I think it might have a mid power mode, can't remember for sure, but the point is you can dial back that power if you're just driving in town, so it's a little more manageable if you're driving in town or driving in areas where you don't want to just give it a half throttle and just be well beyond the speed limit, so you've got that. Kawasaki Sport Traction Control, again, it works with the IMU, the things that can sense if you're wheeling, things that you can sense if your rear end's slipping out sideways, if your front end is slipping out sideways. It can sense every which way the movement of the bike would go and then react to that. So it controls things like your traction control, for instance. So it's not just using the ABS sensors in the wheels, the wheel speed sensors. In other words, if you do a wheelie, your front wheel slows down because it's not being pushed by the ground anymore. It senses the difference and it drops it. It's not just that. It also senses the rise of the bike. It senses a number of different things to keep this thing in control and to control the slip. So that sport function will allow a little bit of slip on the racetrack if you want it. If you're a very skilled rider, that's the kind of thing you're looking for. So again, a lot of bikes, they would just take out all traction control, take out all ABS, and it would be up to the rider. Now you have something that will add some electronic controls to allow you to ride on the racetrack with those feelings, but not get too far out of whack. So that's a nice thing to have, again, for riders who don't get to practice on a track with a bike like this every single day. Just go to the track every now and then. Smartphone connectivity for the very basics. You've got that in there with the Rideology app. ABS, horizontal backlink rear suspension, that's just a way. That IMU is a big piece, and then you've got the KIBS braking system. So this is an ABS brake system, so this one does, again, monitor brake pressure, monitors all kinds of things, the gear shifts, that kind of thing. All of that monitors for your ABS system, so it senses that and basically gives you quicker and better, more accurate pulses. So something that you could still use on the racetrack for the average rider, something that I would definitely use if I was at the racetrack. I'm not an experienced racetrack rider, but it does give you smoother ABS control for a sport bike in precise conditions to allow you to have that ABS still available to you on the track. So those are just some of the technologies in this bike. Let's zip around to the dash now and show you what you've got as far as a cockpit area. So take a look at the cockpit here. We're going to zoom into the screen in a second. I'm just going to turn the handlebar a tiny bit so you can see that green neutral light on the right side there, the orange ABS light there. We're just going to let the steering sit naturally where it would sit on the side stand here. This is the best angle I can get. You can see that windscreen that pops up over your helmet. So this area sends the wind over your shoulders, but this sends it over your helmet. That's what we were talking about earlier. And then you have the steering damper right on top here. Sometimes that's an Olin Series damper. Sometimes you have them buried underneath in other bikes. This one's maybe a little more show off, right? Maybe a little bit more in your face, but of course, especially on a bike which can develop a speed wobble if you get too fast, you want these. A lot of super sport bikes have them, and even just landing a wheelie, it can upset the bike, so that's going to work with you to help that. You do have the adjustable suspension here from the bottom as well, and then we're going to zoom into the dash here as best we can, so hopefully you can sort of follow along with what I'm doing here. So you can see where it says on the very bottom of the dash, the 12.6 volts. This dash is a little hard to film perfectly clear. It's perfectly clear in person, but it's hard to show that. So above that 12.6 volts, you can see the lean angle. It says lean, and there's a little green line. That is a bar graph that will expand out this way as we lean it more, and expand out this way as we lean it that way. So that's a real-time lean angle. But I'm going to cycle through there. You can also see you can see it in degrees. So if you finish a corner and you want to lean down to see if you were leaned over even further, this one has leaned 21 degrees to the left, 12 degrees to the right. We're going to keep cycling through that same information display there. You've got your odometer, trip A, trip B, and then you go back to that lean angle bar graph. And then below that, that battery that says 12.6 volts, you can cycle through that as well. You've got fuel efficiency and currently in liters per 100 kilometers. This is the average fuel efficiency. Again, this bike has barely moved at all, so don't pay any attention to that number. This happens at dealerships. And then you've got fuel, 0.2 liters in there, which is nice to have in actual liters, not in range, not in how far you have to go, just in actual how much fuel you have left. I kind of like that. And then you have average speed there, total time, and the back to battery voltage. So you also have, see the very top beside the neutral, it says sport. We're gonna cycle through those as well. So you've got sport, you've got road, you've got rain. You have to hold the buttons here to get down to that. So that's why it's taking a little while to switch through there. But you've got those ride modes in there. And then of course you've got different types of power modes. One interesting thing is at the very top of your screen, you can see that little light there. As we turn the bike on or off, actually just on only, we'll go to that and do that again right now. As we turn it on, you're gonna see that white light light up and you're gonna see this logo down there. That logo that you just saw on the screen is only what they show on their top end bikes, you know, their real special bikes. So you see that logo and that white light is your shift light. So you have a very bright light shining towards you to tell you when you want to shift. So there's all sorts of controls in here. The full dash we could go through another time. I don't want to go too boring, but there are more controls in that dash. But again, basically a similar dash to what you would see on a sport touring bike, but this one has a few more technologies in there, and of course the shift light. Lots of things to show you in the dash. You can also invert the colors as you can with every Kawasaki with this type of dash. So you can make the white black and the black white, that kind of thing, depending on what you want. So let's take a look at how you control all of this. So taking a look clutch side here, one interesting thing, there is not an adjustable clutch lever here on this ZX-10R. You do have the same controls here as you would have on the Ninja 1100 SX. So what that means is you have your high beam there. You can turn it out to sort of put it on. You can pull it in to flash to pass. And then, you know, that's just your regular in the center. You've got your mode buttons here and select button there. So again, this was what I was using to hold down to switch ride modes, and then an upper display, that lean angle, for instance, and the lower display, which was battery and fuel efficiency, that kind of thing. You can cycle through the lower display. So very easy to understand and control. Then you have your cruise control over here. There's a reset button there, signals, horn, and four-way flashers. Over on the other side, let's see if we can do that in one shot here as we come across. Just a very simple controls here. I think they updated this on the Ninja 1100 SX and they got rid of this select button. I believe they put it on the other side, but your start and kill switch is up there. And then there's a select button down there to select some things. So very similar to the Ninja, or actually the exact same as the Ninja 1000 SX, but I think they may have got rid of that select button on the Ninja 1100 SX. So again, familiar controls, good stuff that works very well, and that's what you would expect here. So again, nice tight compact dash area here as well, which is you know, just part of the Super Sport package. So one thing I never do on this channel is I never show pricing because it can change, especially with dealer inputs and dealer savings. But this is the Canadian Kawasaki website right now. This is the ZX-10R that I was showing you. If you scroll down, there's a ZX-10R R coming. Now, some of the things there are a higher rev limit. You've also got Marchesini forged wheels, Pankel high performance parts. So one thing that's interesting about that is this one is $21,449 Canadian MSRP. That one will be $34,999 MSRP, which raises the question, who is this bike for? So that's what makes this thing interesting is I've claimed for a while that I think this is still a street-oriented bike compared to what it could be. And when you consider the price gap between 21.5 or so to 34 or something, there's a significant price gap. And I think the specs on that bike on the Canadian website as of filming, which is mid-March or so, 2025, I think that bike may have some specs that are wrong because the weight, the curb weight, is listed as identical between the two. And I think if you're starting to change parts here and there, there's no way that you end up with the exact same weight. That one also seems to be more racetrack oriented. So there's going to be some things there. I can't speak on the 10RR yet because I haven't seen it and I haven't got a lot of the information on it. And like I said, I think the website may not tell the whole story when you have things like the curb weight being the exact same. I wouldn't think that would be the exact same when you start swapping out parts. Why would you put on forged wheels that are special other than the name if they didn't save you some grams here and there? So I wonder about all those specs. If that bike becomes available for me to review, I will absolutely review it. But that places this into who is this for? Well, again, I still think if you get a ZX-10, you should have access to a racetrack, and that's where you should be using it. That doesn't mean I'm right. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy it if there's no racetrack. I do think there's a lot of people that want to ride this around, and for some people, they just want to ride to show off. You got the steering damper up here, you got the piggyback shocks down there, the Brembo brakes. A lot of that is stuff that you do not need for the street, and it might just be show off. But what it is going to do is give you the pinnacle of Kawasaki street technology, keeping in mind that there's an RR out there for, you know, $13,000 or $10,000, I don't know, several $1,000s more, $12,000 more, whatever the math was on that. That is going to be essentially this bike with some extra components on there as well. That is actually technically more pinnacle than this. So who buys this? Well, the ZX-6R is the bike that I think is the sort of peak power for most people for the street. The ZX-4R is super sport feelings, but mostly within street speed limits and that kind of thing. The ZX-10RR is a powerhouse that is not only about the power like the H2s. This is also about the handling. You're getting peak handling, you're getting peak performance, you're getting peak everything really for the street in this ZX-10. It's super sport feeling in every which way. It's got super sport power as well. So if you've always dreamed of owning the top end super sport, this is what always was the top end super sport. But now motorcycle manufacturers have gone crazy and they create things like the RR and add a whole bunch of little bits of components to squeeze a little bit more out to the street oriented crowd. Maybe it saves you from tweaking this thing yourself and you can just buy that. But that is my review of the 10R for 2025. A very intriguing bike that I will not be buying. It's more than I need for sure, more than I would want on the road, but awesome bike here. This bike, like I said, is sold and the owner is absolutely gonna love this. If you are the kind of person that's in the market for this bike, again, I mentioned with the ZX-6R that many of its competitors are out of date. Well, this thing doesn't feel in any way out of date. This is definitely higher tech, you know, LED lighting, all that kind of stuff, up-to-date dash, up-to-date suspension. Like, it really is higher tech than some of the competitors out there. And that makes this a absolute buy if you're in this market in 2025. So there you go. There's my review of the 10R, ZX-10R. We'll see if I can get my hands on the 10RR, ZX-10RR, that will also be available later in the year. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll talk to you in the next one.